Buckingham Palace trembles after Princess Anne reads out late Queen's last will. A shocking royal revelation that left the family reeling, and what it means for the future of the crown. The royal whisper that shook the palace walls. Imagine this: the grand, velvet-draped hallways of Buckingham Palace, usually echoing with the muffled steps of royal staff and the occasional clink of fine china, fall into an eerie silence. The air feels heavier than usual. Tension crackles like electricity. Every glance is loaded with unspoken questions. And at the center of this quiet storm stands Princess Anne, her face as composed as a granite statue, holding a folded parchment that could potentially change the fate of the monarchy. That parchment? The last will and testament of Queen Elizabeth II. Now picture the entire royal family seated in the gilded drawing room, Charles shifting uneasily in his chair, Camilla pursing her lips, William glancing at Kate with uncertainty, and Harry, well, let's just say Harry looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. Then Princess Anne begins to read. And what she says next, it stuns the room into complete and utter disbelief. If you're wondering what could possibly make the walls of Buckingham Palace tremble, literally and metaphorically, you're about to find out. So buckle up, because this isn't your average royal family drama. This is the last word of a queen who ruled for 70 years, spoken through the lips of the only daughter who truly understood her. A royal gathering like no other. Tension in the air. Let's rewind for a second. Before Princess Anne even uttered a single syllable, the vibe was thick with tension. This wasn't just a reading of a will, it was the closing chapter of an era. The Queen's final say. Her ultimate mic drop. As the family gathered in the gold room of Buckingham Palace, you could almost see the questions hovering above their heads like invisible thought bubbles. Who gets Balmoral? What about the crown jewels? And the corgis? Who's getting the corgis? But the stakes were much higher than just properties and tiaras. This was about legacy. This was about power. And maybe most importantly, it was about truths that had never been spoken aloud. It's said that Princess Anne took a moment of silence before breaking the royal seal on the envelope. A hush fell so thick you could hear Prince Edward's watch ticking. And then, with a steady voice, she began to read. Windsor for Charles? Expected. Sandringham for Anne? Wait, what? The first part of the will was as expected. King Charles received Windsor Castle, a symbolic gesture that tied him even more tightly to the throne he now occupied. There were subtle nods to tradition, stability, and heritage. But then Anne read something that made jaws quietly drop. To my beloved daughter, and the Sandringham estate. Wait, what? Sandringham? That wasn't just another property. That was sacred royal ground. It was where generations had spent Christmas. Where secrets were whispered in moonlit hallways. Where the Queen herself had once danced barefoot as a girl. And now it was Anne's? This was more than sentiment. It was a statement. A move that disrupted tradition and rattled the very foundation of royal inheritance norms. Historically, major estates passed to male heirs. But here was the Queen, boldly rewriting the script with her final breath. Why Anne? Why now? Anne's silent strength. The monarch who never wore the crown. Let's take a moment to appreciate Princess Anne. No scandal. No tabloid fodder. No reality shows. Just duty. While her brothers and nephews danced around drama and kept her head down and did the work. She was the royal who showed up rain or shine. Whether it was opening hospitals in Hull or shaking hands with fishermen in Cornwall, she embodied the very definition of service. So maybe the Queen was making a quiet confession. This is the daughter who should have been queen. And maybe, just maybe, this was her way of balancing the scales. But the surprises didn't stop there. The younger generation, George, Charlotte, and a heavy crown. Then came a part of the will that tugged at everyone's heartstrings, and maybe injected a dose of pressure no child should have to bear. To my great-grandchildren, George and Charlotte, you carry not just the blood of kings, but the hope of the nation. Now imagine being 10 years old and hearing that. One moment you're worried about your math homework, the next you're told you're the symbolic heartbeat of the monarchy. While no official titles or properties were passed directly to the children, what was passed on was more profound: responsibility. The Queen's message was crystal clear. This wasn't just about lineage. It was about legacy, about showing up when it matters most. But can the younger generation carry that weight? And how will their parents help or hinder that journey? The elephant not in the room: Harry and Meghan. You knew this part was coming. When Anne reached the portion of the will that addressed Prince Harry and Meghan Markle, the entire room leaned forward. Breath held. Cameras off. Heartbeats rapid. To Harry, I leave my love and my hopes for peace. To Meghan, my understanding. That's it. No estate. No titles. No material possessions. Just two carefully chosen sentences, so delicate, so loaded. They practically came gift-wrapped in double meaning. The Queen's restraint here was deafening. She didn't lash out. She didn't scold. She simply acknowledged and moved on. A royal olive branch, or the closing of a chapter. You decide. Charles's reaction: a face worth 1,000 photos. Eyewitnesses say Charles remained composed. Outwardly, at least. But those who knew him best said the tightening of his jaw and the subtle tremor in his hand told another story. He may have received Windsor, and receiving Sandringham? That had to sting. The Queen's message was clear. Leadership isn't just about wearing the crown. It's about earning respect. And sometimes, the crown doesn't sit on the head. It rests on the shoulders of those who carry the heaviest burdens in silence. Did Charles see it coming? Probably not. But sometimes the strongest monarchs are shaped not by what they receive, but by what they don't. An emotional final note: unity, division, and everything in between. And then came the final paragraph. Anne's voice reportedly faltered for the first time. To my family, I leave not just memories but a charge: to stand united, even when divided; to speak kindly, even when angered; and to remember that while the crown may pass, the duty remains eternal. There it was, the Queen's final wish. Not for wealth, not for power, but for unity. In a world tearing at the seams with division, this was her gentle reminder. Families bend, but they don't have to break. And if this family, one of the most watched, analyzed, and scrutinized on Earth, can find a way to heal, maybe there's hope for the rest of us too. What this means for the future. The monarchy reinvented? So what now? With and holding Sandringham, Charles at Windsor, and the younger royals being groomed for a future far more transparent and turbulent than any before them, what does this really mean? It means the monarchy is no longer just a symbol. It's a family. Flawed. Fractured. But still standing. It's about tradition, yes, but also evolution. It's about understanding that legacy isn't preserved by keeping things the same. It's protected by the courage to change. And the Queen, even in death, has nudged her family and her country toward a new beginning. A royal reminder for all of us. We may not live in castles or wear crowns, but Queen Elizabeth's final message wasn't just for the Windsors. It was for anyone navigating family drama, trying to balance tradition with progress, or simply learning how to forgive. Sometimes the greatest gift isn't an inheritance. It's a reminder that love, real, unconditional love, means showing up, even when it's hard. So the next time you're faced with a difficult conversation, a family feud, or just the messiness of being human, remember the Queen's final words. Stand united, even when divided. Let that be your crown. Behind closed doors. After the will was read. Once Princess Anne read the final line, silence fell again. But this time, it wasn't just tense. It was thick with emotion. Some royals blinked back tears. Others stared at the floor, lost in thought. No one knew what to say. How do you respond when the woman who led your family and your country for over 70 years leaves you with a message that cuts right to the core? According to insiders, Princess Kate was the first to break the silence, whispering something to William and gently squeezing his hand. Harry, noticeably distant, reportedly walked out before the gathering formally ended. And Charles? He asked for a moment alone. And that was the moment it became clear. The Queen hadn't just left behind properties and possessions. She left a mirror, one that forced each family member to look at who they had become and who they might need to become. The Sandringham shift, Anne's unexpected power. Let's go back to that bequest, Sandringham. Handing it to, and wasn't just unexpected, it was transformative. For centuries, women in the royal family have been figureheads, symbols, or supporters. Rarely have they held major royal estates in their own right. And yet, Queen Elizabeth broke that mold for her daughter. And, long dubbed the hardest-working royal, now finds herself holding one of the monarchy's most important properties. And she's doing it with that signature no-nonsense grace. You won't find Anne parading around in front of cameras, but don't mistake her quiet for passivity. The Queen knew that Sandringham in Anne's hands meant preserving the estate and the values that came with it: duty, service, and humility. Is it possible Anne will now become a de facto moral compass for the family? Don't be surprised if she quietly becomes the glue that holds them together in the Queen's absence. Charles's crown, Camilla's concern. While King Charles may have formally inherited the throne and Windsor Castle, the Queen's will subtly shifted the family's emotional balance of power. By giving Sandringham to and passing her most heartfelt messages to the younger royals, the Queen placed Charles in a tricky spot. He's king, yes. But is he the heart of the family now? Camilla, too, may have felt the implications. As Queen Consort, she has long walked a complicated line in public perception. And while she and Elizabeth grew closer in recent years, the will made no grand gesture in Camilla's favor, just a nod of acknowledgement and a few private personal items. Was that a reflection of respect? Or simply the Queen keeping peace without stirring too much emotion? One thing's for sure. Camilla now knows that her legacy will depend on what she does next. Her support for Charles will be under even more scrutiny, and with Anne's star rising, Camilla may find herself